Chapter 51 Brother Ming's Courage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Blood and brains mixed together, creating a cruel color. The pointed-toed shoes stepped on the blood-red mud, and the blond boy with blood on his face showed morbid joy and satisfaction, laughing wildly. Beihai. At this moment, the members of the Phil's Mafia family looked at the ferocious young man, and felt an unprecedented fear in their hearts. Their faces turned pale, and they even subconsciously stopped moving their hands. This kid. Devil. He is a devil. Burning ruins, collapsed buildings, swaying black smoke, twisted flames, the blond boy, standing next to a headless corpse, looked like a devil emerging from blood and fire. Tory Bull and other family officials looked at Doflamingo's back with extremely hot admiration and pride in their eyes. This is the king they are willing to surrender to. How dazzling! Like a rising star, shining and dazzling, the majesty and light he exuded, as well as his naturally noble and sacred blood, deeply impressed each of them. A cold smile appeared on Doflamingo's lips. He stepped directly over Phil's body and continued walking forward. The fingers of his hands kept moving, as if they were connecting to something. As he moved, it seemed as if some extremely sharp weapon was constantly passing through the void, leaving smooth cuts on the streets, on the walls of the buildings, on the ground. At the same time, in front of him, a dozen members of the Phil's gangster family all froze in their movements. The line of bright red, dazzling blood gradually enlarged from their throats. They couldn't react at all, and they felt that the world in front of them suddenly began to tilt and turn upside down. Then, they see their own bodies. I saw my shoes. Doubts appeared in their dull, gradually dilated pupils. Finally lost its vitality. Their heads are separated from their bodies. Laugh. On the headless corpses that stood motionless, blood spurted out like fountains from the incisions on their necks, spreading all over the ground. Beihai. Doflamingo laughed more and more crazily. In the fearful eyes of the Phil's family, he continued to move forward, spreading blood, pain and cries along the way. Then, kill them all. Doflamingo smiled and gave the order. As soon as the words fell, the eyes of the pirates of the Don Quixote family flashed crimson and crazy. Like wild beasts that were extremely hungry, they attacked without mercy. In just a few moments, dozens of gang members from the Phil's family fell to the ground and died. So the one-sided massacre began. On the originally bustling streets, blood flowed like a stream, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Doflamingo stood in the middle of the street, looking at the purgatory-like scene in front of me. Couldn't help but take a deep breath. This is the life I want. In a chaotic world, all evil derivation, only the winner can move to the final stage. What an interesting world. What a wonderful world. He opened his hands wildly, and his body, which was less than 1.5 meters tall, exuded a domineering, cruel and unruly aura. The smell of smoke, sweat, gunpowder, blood, corpses and fear was everywhere. This is his favorite flavor, the smell of chaos. In the burning town, he saw the eyes of the members of the Phil's family looking at him, fearful, surrendered, trembling, eyes that dare not look directly. Yes, that's the look. The despicable ants living in this world should look at me like this. Father, have you seen it? This is the look that untouchables should be giving us. This is the life we, the noble celestial dragons, should enjoy. In a daze, Doflamingo seemed to remember that time. He still remembered the smell of blood, the stench of sweat and gunpowder smoke, the deafening screams, the vicious and hateful curses, and the distorted faces that were constantly swaying in the flames. The untouchables who were supposed to be kneeling on the ground held torches and arrows in their hands, but they, as the great celestial dragons, the noble Don Quixote family, were tied to the city wall like pigs and beasts, and were almost burned alive. Father, you are wrong. You are wrong. I'm right. Doflamingo clenched his fists, and his sunglasses shone with a cold and cruel light. Tear. A pale thunder suddenly tore open the dim sky, completely illuminating the hellish world. The storm that had been brewing for a long time finally came, and it started to rain heavily in the gloomy sky. Thunder and lightning. Wow! The torrential rain washed away everything on the earth, washed with blood, patting the corpse, extinguished the flames. The thunder in the sky gradually became deafening, covering the shouts and wailing in the streets. The killings gradually began to subside, and the massacre entered its final stage, with the death of their leader, and in the face of Doflamingo's overwhelming strength, the members of the Phil's family had already lost the courage to continue fighting. They kept pleading and even knelt on the ground begging for mercy, but what greeted them was the ruthless sword of the Don Quixote family. Half an hour passed quickly, the sudden rainstorm disappeared suddenly, on the rain-swept streets. White mist emerged from the ruins of buildings. Everywhere, red blood seeped into the gaps between the bricks and stones. Bodies fell to the ground in scattered directions, do not know when, that he was the only one standing in the street. Raindrops dripped from his hair, clothes and trousers to the ground. Around him, Torbol and other members of the Don Quixote family were kneeling on the ground with respectful expressions, the weapons in their hands still bleeding, quietly waiting for their king to give orders. Go ahead and take over this island. The smile on Doflamingo's face had faded at this time, and he said with a cold expression, try not to use violence against civilians as much as possible, and let the island know clearly that the arrival of our Don Quixote family will only bring them a more stable life. His hands were trembling slightly, as if he was trying his best to contain the urge to destroy everything in his heart, but he knew he had to get a hold of himself. Rubeck Island, no, the North Sea is just the beginning. Before heading out into the wider world, he knew he had to accumulate as much as possible first, wandering around the world. Keep looting town after town. That's something only low-level pirates would do. Territory. Power. Resource. He is annexing everything step by step and controlling enough resources and power. One day, the whole world will kneel before Doflamingo. But until then, he must work hard to restrain himself. Hearing this, the admiration in the eyes of the members of the Don Quixote family became more intense, and they lowered their heads in sincerity. Only those who control their desires and impulses are worthy of their lives to follow. This is their young master. Pa, pa, pa. At this time, a burst of inappropriate applause suddenly sounded. Everyone in the Don Quixote family was stunned for a moment, then turned around with wary faces and looked at the sound. I saw a tall and straight figure standing on the top of a ruined building at some point, clapping his hands and looking down at their young master with interest. Good courage and vision. There is a completely different look between a pure libertine and a person who is determined to do great things. You are very good, Doflamingo. The black-haired young man smiled. Ask for everything and be grateful. Chapter 52. I want to talk. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Doflamingo's eyes narrowed under his sunglasses and he looked at this uninvited guest seriously. The black-haired young man stood on the ruins of a building that was smoking white, while clapping his hands. He is tall and straight, different from ordinary people, with short black hair and a wide white cloak behind him that gently rises and falls with the wind filled with the smell of gunpowder smoke. Although he was a low-level pariah, this young man gave him the impression of a tall, fierce, and handsome beast, exuding a noble temperament that could only be found in elite celestial dragons. He has the deep face of a warrior, the kind of man who laughs loudly at his own pain, strong yet elegant, wild yet noble, arrogant without losing his wits. This is a man whose eyes are always on the distant horizon. He had an interested smile on his face. Doflamingo knew that smile well. He had flashed a similar smile to his target countless times in the past. A hunter looks at his prey with a cat-and-mouse teasing smile. The moment this thought came out, Doflamingo suddenly felt the uncontrollable desire for destruction deep in his heart, an uncontrollable desire and anger that wants to kill, no, destroy this man. How dare he look at himself with such eyes? That look was just like the look those 5 damn old men of the world government looked at me when she was carrying her father's head up the stairs to heaven. Doflamingo. Navy. Torbol quickly reacted and confirmed Darren's identity the moment he saw Darren's military uniform. In an instant, Darren felt murderous intent coming from all directions like a tide. Swish, swish, swish. The members of the Don Quixote family scattered around raised their spears in unison and stared fiercely at the black-haired marine. Hundreds of black hole muzzles were all focused on Darren. They are the Don Quixote pirates. They never paid attention to the mere navy. Hey, 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 do you pull out a gun when you disagree? That at this time, I only heard the naval colonel raising his hands in a gesture of surrender and saying something with a smile. This action, is he surrendering? Torbol and others saw weird and ridiculous expressions on their faces when Darren raised his hands, but the strange scene that followed made them suddenly feel a biting chill coming from the soles of their feet and rushing to their brains in an instant. I don't like having a gun pointed at me. The Navy captain laughed. The members of the Don Quixote family were all stunned. Suddenly, an invisible force suddenly spread from the rear admiral in front of them. They felt that the gun in their hands was suddenly wrapped up by an irresistible force, and they could not control the release of it. I saw the fine steel spear spinning in mid-air, and the muzzle was actually aimed at my eyebrows. What power is this? The expressions of everyone in the Don Quixote family changed drastically, and the pistols actually started to move on their own. They have never seen such weird power. The moment the gun was pointed between their eyebrows, they subconsciously raised their hands. Click. The safety of the long gun suspended in mid-air was automatically opened. Pull the trigger, and little by little, such a terrifying scene, such a close distance, that it even made them smell the gunpowder in their own guns. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. The entire street was extremely quiet, and you could hear a pin drop. Only the subtle click sound of hundreds of musket triggers being pulled bit by bit could be heard. An extremely strong fear of death instantly filled their brains, making each of them look pale. Someone made a sound of throat rolling and swallowing saliva. Well, at least this way everyone has raised their hands and surrendered. I think that guy Porcelino will like this scene very much. Darren looked at the originally aggressive pirates who were pointed at by his gun, and raised their hands with pale faces and frightened faces, and couldn't help but make fun of them. He turned to look at the blonde kid. Hey, Doflamingo, I want to talk to you. At first, Darren simply wanted to come over and deal with Doflamingo, the sickly blonde brat, and beat Xiao Feng. If you're in a bad mood, just beat him up and kill him. If he's in a good mood, well, then give him a good time. With his own ability, he can definitely wipe out the Don Quixote family easily, and no one in the world will know about it. Not even the world government can find out. As for Doflamingo's so-called celestial dragon bloodline, Darren couldn't care less. No, the incident of Hilda's saint has shown that the lives of the celestial dragons also have a price, but Doflamingo's words just now made him change his mind. It is true that Doflamingo is a twisted madman full of destructive desires, but he is more shrewd, cunning, and more organized than ordinary madmen. He is different from those pirates who only know how to destroy and plunder. He can restrain his desires for the sake of his ambition. Such people, even if they are hostile to each other, are worthy of Darren's high regard, and most importantly, Doflamingo's identity as a former celestial dragon, coupled with his methods and abilities, should be of great use if controlled properly. If you can control him, many of your future actions will be much easier. Even the world government doesn't dare to cause trouble for itself, let alone the headquarters. Let's talk. Doflamingo seemed to have heard some ridiculous joke and laughed sadly. Hey. Pirates and Navy have nothing to talk about. That's not necessarily the case. I'm not an ordinary Marine. Darren shrugged indifferently and said with interest. But I don't want to talk to you at all. Doflamingo's smile suddenly turned ferocious and twisted, his sunglasses flashed with a cold light, and he suddenly raised his hand and swung it at Darren from the air. Laughing ferociously. I just want to kill you. Laugh. A sudden sharp crack ripped through the air. There seemed to be an invisible sharp sword passing through the void, cutting through everything. A slender cut suddenly appeared in the walls of the two buildings in front, and then the upper half of the building collapsed, rumbled along the smooth cut. Kang. A clear voice sounded. Doflamingo's pupils shrank. I saw that the black-haired Marine's chest had been cut open in his military uniform. The almost transparent sharp thread cut into the skin of his chest, but sparks of metal friction appeared, unable to penetrate even an inch. Impossible! Toripole and other cadres exclaimed with shock on their faces, unable to believe their eyes. Although the young master is still very young, with the blessing of amazing talents, he has already developed the ability of the thread fruit to a very high level. That kind of sharp thread can kill people invisible, not to mention mere flesh and blood. Even buildings and rocks can be cut easily. With all his strength, the young master even cut a pirate ship in half on the sea. But now, the young master's thread fruit ability is actually unable to cut this Marine's body. What a monster this is! Thread fruit. It's a pity that you haven't mastered domineering yet. Darren looked down at the sharp thread stuck between the muscles and suddenly smiled. With his current physique, except for the swordsman's slashes, any attack that does not contain the domineering aura will basically not cause any harm to him. Doflamingo is only 12 or 13 years old now, and when he is still growing, he can achieve this step, and his talent is already far better than most geniuses in this sea. In the frozen eyes of the Don Quixote family, Darren stretched out his fingers, hooked the silk thread stuck on his chest, and pulled it gently, seemingly casually. Doflamingo's expression changed slightly. The silk thread connecting his fingers conveyed a terrifying force that was simply impossible to contend with. His body was dragged by the thread, flying upside down from where he was, and flying quickly towards Darren. If you dare to draw a gun, you should be prepared to be killed. Darren looked at Doflamingo, who was dragged over by him, and said with a smile, snapped. He snapped his fingers, then bang 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 bang. Heavy gunshots echoed in the streets. The trigger of the long gun hovering in mid-air was pulled at the same time. Flowers of blood bloomed on the foreheads of Don Quixote family members. Their heads fell back and they fell like dominoes, and this time, Doflamingo has been dragged 3 meters in front of Darren, in his sunglasses. It reflected the cold smile on the Navy's face. Getting closer, ask for everything and be grateful. Chapter 53. It's the Tianlong people who did it. You are listening at novelfold.audio. Little Lord. Douer. Damn. Seeing their young master being dragged by the powerful monster like Navy, Torbol and the others were so shocked that their scalps were numb. They all picked up their weapons and rushed towards Darren with eyes wide open, trying to save Doflamingo. There was no regard for the hundreds of members of the Don Quixote family who were shot and killed. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. Looking at Doflamingo, who was dragged by him, the Navy captain's lips curled up into a sneer, and he exuded a strong and deep aura. The broad cloak of justice behind him was not moving in the wind, and with his clenched fists, the air even made a buzzing sound like it was being crushed. The distance between the two was instantly shortened, and in the blink of an eye, they were already close at hand. Darren punched out as hard as a meteorite. Roar! The power and explosive power of this punch was so violent that a violent wind blew up in the space in front of him, blowing Doflamingo's young face and cheeks. Bang! Doflamingo's sunglasses were cracked by the wind. What a terrifying power! This Navy is simply a ferocious humanoid beast. This is the character Beihai should have. With such a powerful strength, shouldn't the Navy headquarters transfer him to the Grand Line, or the New World? Doflamingo's eyes were in a trance. Even Darren's powerful punch, it seemed as if there were waves of twisted illusions appearing in his mind. The fist wearing a black leather glove seemed to be constantly enlarging, and a shadow like a landslide enveloped his figure. A flash of coldness suddenly surged out from the soles of Doflamingo's feet and went straight up to his tailbone. An unprecedented sense of death threat instantly invaded his brain. You wanna die? Doflamingo shuddered all over, gritted his teeth, and roared angrily. If he was hit head-on by this punch, he would definitely die. Feeling the majestic wind and waves hitting his face, Doflamingo had this thought in his mind: block, it must be blocked. The moment the thought flashed through his mind, the thread connecting his fingers was cut off by him. His hands with bulging veins were raised like chicken claws, and he grabbed forward heavily in mid-air. Aha! Hundreds of white threads spurted out instantly, densely forming a huge spider web, like a snow-white wall, straddling Darren and Doflamingo. The end of the spider web penetrated deeply into the surrounding dozens of buildings and the ground, forming an impeccable and absolute defense. Cobweb wall defense. Point one punch fell. Facing the wall of spider web created by Doflamingo using his devil fruit ability, Darren just kept a cold smile. There are no changes in the movements. The strong wind blew the tips of his black hair continuously, and the eyes under the tips were full of confidence and fierceness that could crush everything. A punch like a landslide, with fierce and domineering speed and power, dragged out a spiral of white air waves in the air, blasting towards the spider web wall made of silk threads. The moment when the fist and the spider web touched, the spiderweb wall, whose strength and toughness was comparable to metal, was suddenly stretched and deformed, and blasted towards Doflamingo in an exaggerated manner without losing any speed. Doflamingo was in a state of panic, and his eyes under his sunglasses. were filled with ferocious bloodshot eyes. Damn bastard! How can I lose here? Boom! A majestic and domineering momentum burst out from his body like a violent wind and spread out crazily in all directions. The color of heaven and earth suddenly changed, the world in front of him seemed to suddenly turn into black and white, and waves of shock from the depths of his soul swept through most of the town like waves. The four Toribol people who were attacking Darren seemed to have received some invisible heavy blow, and their steps stopped uncontrollably. They stared at Doflamingo with shocked expressions on their faces, and their hearts were racing. It's the momentum of the young master. The spirit of a king. As expected of Douer. Feeling the impact of the waves one after another, their souls and spirits were shaken, and they were almost unable to stand still. Overlord color and domineering. The majesty of a king that only one person among millions can possess. It was precisely because they had witnessed Doflamingo's kingly spirit that they were able to sincerely accept this 12 or 13-year-old brat as their king and kneel down to worship him. Under the threat of life and death, Doflamingo unconsciously unleashed his overlord color domineering energy. But before they could react, another, more profound, majestic, and domineering momentum burst out at the same time. Boom! Torbol and the others' eyes widened in horror, their faces full of disbelief. Overlord color and domineering. The same kingly spirit as the young master. No, this aura is even more frightening than the young master's. It gave them the feeling as if they were facing an iron-blooded emperor or a purgatory Shura, which gave rise to surrender and fear in their hearts. The owner of this momentum. Impossible! Diamante screamed in horror, and her face covered in various paints turned pale. It's the Navy. That Navy. A naval colonel in the North Sea, actually possesses the spirit of a king. Boom! Accompanied by the strange screams of several of them, two overlord color domineering energies collided violently in mid-air. Like a vast storm, they poured out from the bodies of Darren and Doflamingo crazily, colliding with each other in mid-air. Compression and expansion and compression. Crackling, black-red lightning suddenly exploded densely in the void, constantly arising and dying. The storm carried countless bricks, soil, and dust into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds in the sky. The collision of domineering colors. Toribol murmured with a pale face. Unconsciously, their bodies were completely exhausted, their brains were dizzy, and they knelt down on one knee, struggling to raise their arms to block the strong wind. You actually have the same qualifications as a king like me. Doflamingo's facial muscles twisted and roared, unable to accept the scene before him. Darren sneered. Although overlord color domineering energy is rare, in the chaotic and dangerous New World Sea, strong men with overlord color domineering energy are like crucian carp crossing the river. As soon as he finished speaking, the Navy captain's arm muscles suddenly swelled, breaking through his uniform. With the second burst of power, the sleeves of the military uniform exploded into fragments all over the sky, and the fists fell again. Keep approaching Doflamingo. The domineering look actually has the tendency to suppress the latter. Damn it! How can you suppress me with your overbearing domineering power? Doflamingo's pupils trembled violently, roaring crazily, and the skin of the hands controlling the thread burst, exploding every inch of blood mist. I am, Don Quixote Doflamingo. The threads produced by the thread fruit are extremely strong, even swordsmen cannot cut them, and no matter how powerful the navy is, they cannot break through. Can block it. It can definitely be blocked. I am, the noble Tianlong. What I do is the Tianlong people. A cold shout interrupted him unceremoniously. Darren stepped on the ground, and the land within a radius of 30 meters directly shattered under his feet. Countless cracks formed the shape of a spider web, and then large muddy waves exploded one after another. The moment the earth roared, he used the recoil force to explode with all his strength. Terrifying power comparable to that of giants emerges from the soles of the feet and is transmitted upward along the spine. The Navy captain's body was like a bow that was tense to the extreme, and all the majestic power poured out from his fists. Click. Tear. In the eyes of Torbol and others with fear and shock, under Doflamingo's stunned expression, the snow-white wall of spider web seemed to have been hit by a meteorite. The center is directly sunk in, and the dense threads of the spider web wall spread out and connected everything, large tracts of land, the walls of buildings, the main body of the building of a short private house, being uprooted abruptly. The power of Darren's punch actually overturned more than a dozen buildings and a large area of land. This extremely exaggerated scene made Doflamingo's hair stand on end. He felt an unspeakable fear rising in his heart and hitting his throat. He didn't break through his own silk defense, he directly overturned the silk thread fixation. Boom! Before he could react, Darren's unabated fist hit Doflamingo directly in the stomach. Although there are more than a dozen buildings and heavy land being dragged, the exaggerated power contained in it still explodes. A circle of white air ripples on the ladder's back. Doflamingo's eyes instantly turned white, his bloodshot eyeballs squeezed out of their sockets, and his mind went blank. His body curved and arched in midair. Wow! A mouthful of blood spat out from his mouth. The next moment, Doflamingo was shot backwards like a cannonball, flying at high speed. He knocked away Torbol, who was kneeling on the ground. He crashed through the tall lampposts in the street. He crashed through one house after another, crashed through all obstacles on the flight path. After flying dozens of meters, his figure disappeared directly into a building. With the shaking of the earth and the mountains, the several-meter-high building let out an overwhelmed whine, collapse. At the same time, the back of Rubeck Island, on the coastline, a warship docked there. Nearly 100 Beihai Navy soldiers were in full formation, waiting for orders from their superiors with a solemn air. In the distance, countless civilians, led by groups of Marines, fled from the town in panic. Report to Major Flying Squirrel, the civilians on the island have basically been evacuated. The cordon has been raised. A Navy soldier salutes a flying squirrel standing on the roof of a building. The flying squirrel, who was observing the distance with a lookout glass, did not look back, but just waved his hand to indicate that he understood. He did not take his eyes off the look glass. At this time, a dull roar came from a distant town. The flying squirrel saw the billowing smoke roaring up like a dragon through the lookout glass. He slowly put down the observation glass and covered his forehead in helplessness and pain. This is too messy. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. It's like a father beating his son. Ask for everything and be grateful. I haven't been feeling well these past 2 days. I just came back from the hospital today. I will update as much as possible from tomorrow on. Well, different style, different story, but he's still the same old horse. Good luck. Chapter 54. One person at a time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rumble. Through the lookout glass, he observed the collapsing buildings one after another in the ruins of the distant town, as well as the smoke and dust rising from the ground like a dragon dancing wildly. The muscles in the corners of the flying squirrel's eyes twitched. Even as his adjutant, Flying Squirrel didn't know what level Darren's true strength had reached, but from the inhuman training he usually performs day after day, Flying Squirrel can infer. In the North Sea, except for a very small number of big pirates with nicknames who came here due to various reasons, no one is Darren's opponent. The ability of the magnetic fruit gives him a wide range of attack and control methods that are not inferior to those with natural abilities. As for close combat, besides Sakaski, who was still working in Beihai back then, who could fight hand-to-hand with that lunatic Darren? At least the Flying Squirrel had never seen someone as ruthless as Darren. Facing the enemy, once the goal is determined, go all out, never give up until the goal is achieved, and never look forward or backward, and he is more cruel to himself than to his enemies. As for the arrogant, paranoid, sick brat Doflamingo, let him wish for his own good. His life and death are in Darren's hands. Civilians have been evacuated and towns have been sealed off, making it impossible for news to get out. A former Draco? If you die, just die. Anyway, this is not the first Tianlong person to die in Beihai. The moment this idea emerged, the Flying Squirrel suddenly seemed to realize something and woke up suddenly. I have such disrespectful thoughts towards the Supreme Celestial Dragon. Unconsciously, a layer of cold sweat broke out on his back. The Flying Squirrel took a deep breath, smiled bitterly, and murmured in a low voice. Darren, you are absolutely right. The meanings represented by 0 and 1 are indeed different. Rubeck Island, town center, rumble, the smashed buildings collapsed one after another, sending up clouds of dust. The earth let out an overwhelming wail, sending a heart-stopping vibration. Click, the sound of a lighter sounded. Darren stood on a barren, collapsed, cracked land, took out a cigar and lit it. The military uniform on his body had been tattered in the battle. He chewed his cigar, unbuttoned the navy cloak, pulled off the black tie, grabbed the tattered uniform with one hand and pulled hard. Tear. The military uniform was torn open, revealing his wild and explosive upper body. The contours of the carved muscles are extremely clear, and they beat and rise rhythmically with every breath. His skin was covered with dense scars, and combined with his unruly and deep eyes, he looked like a wild beast. Well, it's much more comfortable this way. Darren grinned. At this time, an angry and slow voice sounded. I said, how dare you? Torbol, who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, waved his cane, and disgusting mucus spurted out from the cane. It suddenly stuck to the remains of a 4-meter-high residential house and dragged it heavily towards Darren. Slimy meteor. The wreckage of the house was thrown up high, making a dull buzzing sound as it fell at high speed. The howling wind blew against my face, causing the cigar to suddenly light up with red light. Darren narrowed his eyes, raised his hand and waved slightly to the left. Among the wreckage of the house that hit the house head-on, steel bars instantly penetrated from the inside of the building. Tear. The building debris was torn in half by the twisted steel in the center, whizzing past Darren's left and right sides, plowing long grooves in the ground. Darren immediately raised his hand. Without anyone's orders, thick steel bars and metals shot up from the ground, constantly cutting, dividing, stretching, and lengthening like living creatures. Dozens of gleaming metal spikes hovered around Darren. Under Torbal's stunned eyes, he smiled and waved to the former. Whoosh. Dozens of metal spikes shot out in unison, surpassing the speed of sound in an instant, and sank into Torbal's position at an extremely astonishing speed. Boom! Rolling dust instantly rose from the ground, and a large amount of mucus continued to splash under the penetration of metal spikes. Darren then took steps forward, but his body suddenly swayed. The land in front of me suddenly fluttered like a flag, like wild grass waving in the wind in the endless wilderness. He raised his eyebrows and his eyes instantly locked onto a figure. Diamanti, dressed as an Indian, squatted not far away with red hands and pressed one hand on the ground. Army flag, that the ability to fly fruits. It can turn the entire ground within a certain range around the user into a shape as light and fluttering as cloth, making the ground look like a large piece of cloth fluttering in the wind. It can make the opponent unable to maintain balance and lose their center of gravity and fall, thereby making the opponent lose the ability to counterattack. And at the moment when Darren stood unsteadily, a figure suddenly jumped up behind him. The young man wore sunglasses and had an expressionless face. There was a piece of leftover steak stained on his bearded face, and he was holding a handful of emerald green bamboo in his hands. Virgo. Ghost bamboo. Virgo's eyes turned cold, and the bamboo in his hand hit Darren hard on the back of the head. Snapped. The bamboo, which was as strong as steel, shattered with the sound, exploding into countless debris. Virgo's pupils shrank instantly and his heart beat rapidly. This guy's body structure, is he still human? Before he could react, he felt his eyes blur and the black-haired Marine had disappeared like a ghost. Buzz. The sound of air bursting suddenly rang in my ears. Virgo turned his head away with difficulty. A shiny black military boot magnified rapidly in the reflection of his sunglasses. Boom. Virgo's figure flew out like a cannonball and sank directly into a building. The building then collapsed, triggering bursts of thunder. In the billowing smoke, the Navy captain's face, chewing a cigar, poked out of the smoke, and a spear made of twisted metal suddenly pierced through the air. At a speed that Diamanti could not react, it penetrated directly into his abdomen, lifted his body away, and then nailed it deeply into a wall. Diamanti spat out a large pool of blood from her mouth, and, under the severe pain, her eyes looked at the Navy captain with unprecedented fear. Rumble. At this time, a building nearby suddenly exploded, and the movable rock instantly expanded into a 20-meter-tall rock giant, waving a huge fist with a diameter of 3 meters, and struck down at Darren condescendingly. This is a perfect opportunity. You are dead. A sharp and harsh sound sounded. It's Pika. Ask for everything, thank you very much. After reading the comments from the big guys, there are a lot of controversies about Guion. Let me explain. In this timeline, Guion is only a teenager. He grew up in the headquarters and was pampered by the Navy bosses. Therefore, it is normal for his ideas to be silly and naive. It's like a college student who hasn't graduated yet, with clear eyes and stupidity. You can't expect him to be very pragmatic. I am also a college student here, hahaha, it's just a joke. Not just her, but also Kazan, who will appear soon. Kazan in his youth, his justice is not lazy but burning. My plot line for this book is very long, from the Roger era to After the Top, so each character has an obvious growth line, which is not the stereotype of normal fan fiction, but please trust my level. I will try my best to write the style of each character. By the way, there will be more updates today. Chapter 55. Can we chat now? You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's hard to imagine that Pika, a big, silly guy, could have such a laugh-inducing high-pitched voice. A huge shadow rose behind the naval captain, completely covering him. However, Darren did not feel at all dazed or disoriented at being attacked. Instead, he stepped into the ground as if he had predicted it. As rock splashed beneath his feet, a mocking sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth that was chewing a cigar. The naval captain suddenly turned around and punched hard with his backhand. For Pika, who is good at strength, of course, we must use stronger strength, to crush him. Only such a rough and wild fighting style can bring you the excitement of punching and punching. The next second, two fists with vastly different sizes collided violently in mid-air like meteors hitting the earth. Boom! It was as if an ancient copper bell was being struck heavily, and the surrounding air suddenly produced rippling ripples. However, this stalemate only lasted half a second. Under the gradually horrified, twisted and frightened face of the rock giant, the huge fists, arms, shoulders, and even the giant's body made of rock, all crackled and made a shattering sound. Countless cracks spread from the point where Darren's fist landed, and finally covered the surface of the 20-meter-tall rock. Giant in an instant, the majestic power poured out from the Navy captain's fist like the breath of a giant dragon. Boom! The body of the rock giant immediately fell apart and turned into rubble scattered across the sky like a rain curtain. Among the scattered gravel, Pika, wearing golden armor, hovered in mid-air with a dull expression on his face, unable to believe his eyes. Darren's figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. In the blink of an eye, it appeared above Pika. The black military boots were raised high, carrying a white wave of air, heading towards Pika's head, falling like a tomahawk. Boom! Pika's entire body sank into the earth like a meteorite, and huge vibrations and roars exploded in the center of the town. The ground within 100 meters radius collapsed by half a meter, and a huge column of dust and water rose into the sky. Super hit whip. At this moment, a hoarse roar came from a distance. 100-meter-long silk thread suddenly fell from the sky. From a distance, it looked like a slash from the sky, cutting Darren in midair directly into the ground. Sharp threads sank into the ground, and violent vibrations continued to spread. A deep mark was cut into the ground in the center of the street, and it collapsed toward the center. The buildings on both sides of the street tilted and collapsed, causing huge clouds of smoke and dust. 100 meters away, Doflamingo, covered in blood, struggled to crawl out of the ruins, panting and staring at the smoke-filled center, gritting his teeth, and blood could not stop oozing from the corners of his mouth. At this time, he had completely lost the arrogance he had. When he first landed on Lubeck Island, the sunglasses are full of cracks and could break at any time. Her short blonde hair was mixed with dirt and blood, making it look slimy. There was a large dent in his ribs, and his face was as pale as a dead person. Did you succeed? Doflamingo's eyes under his sunglasses were fixed on the smoke-filled location in the distance, and he didn't even care about the several cadres who were seriously injured and fell to the ground. The super attack whip is the strongest move he has mastered at this time. It is so powerful that it can even easily cut a pirate ship in half from the center. Even that monster is impossible. The moment this thought came out, Doflamingo seemed to see some horrific scene, and his bloodshot pupils shrank tightly into thin needles. As the thick smoke was gradually blown away by the strong wind, a tall and looming figure slowly emerged. Call. Doflamingo heard a long exhale. The slowly exhaled cigar smoke condensed into a flag in front of the terrifying figure. The sound of footsteps came slowly. The first person to step out of the thick smoke was a black military boot. Then there are the straight and slender feet, muscular and angular body, a handsome and cool face. The cigar in his mouth was still burning, flashing red light from time to time. There was a dazzling blood mark on his chest, which was bleeding continuously. A sharp thread was firmly embedded in the flesh, but could not cut off its bones. Well, it's kind of funny, it actually hurt me. Darren lowered his head and glanced at the silk thread that was obviously much thicker. He reached out and wiped a handful of blood, put it in the corner of his mouth and licked it. Doflamingo suddenly felt that the pores all over his body stood up at this moment, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. This guy smiled. He was actually enjoying the fun of fighting and getting hurt. Then, enough fun. Darren casually pulled out the thread stuck between the flesh and blood, twisted his neck, raised his head and looked at Doflamingo, the blonde kid, and smiled ferociously. His knees sank slightly. Use force. Boom. Behind him, patches of land and ruins collapsed at the same time, creating huge fan grooves. Darren's figure was like a cannonball, shooting out from the place at a speed that could not be caught by the naked eye, so fast. Too fast. Doflamingo's pupils trembled, he only felt his vision blur, and a fist had hit his abdomen heavily. Boom. Doflamingo bent over and vomited blood, his eyeballs about to burst. Boom. Another punch hit his chin from bottom to top. Snap. He heard the crack of his jawbone. The figure rose up under the impact of this punch and was thrown into the air. The next moment, Darren's figure suddenly shot up from the ground, and in a blink of an eye he was in front of Doflamingo and kicked out. Boom. Doflamingo flew backward sideways, haven't landed yet. A knee bump hit his back hard from behind, so on the edge of the distant island, the flying squirrel looked through the lookout glass and saw a scene that made his scalp numb. The blonde kid with the noble celestial dragon blood flowing through his body, like a rubber ball. Darren repeatedly tortured, whipped, kneed, and elbowed him in midair. Blood kept spraying out. It looked extremely miserable, and around the ruined streets of the seriously injured family cadres under Doflamingo's command had turned pale with fright, staring dumbly at the exaggerated scene in front of them. After a full minute, following Darren's volley, Doflamingo, whose skin was torn all over and with at least 20 bone fractures, crashed into the ground. Darren's figure also landed steadily. He flicked the ashes of his cigar, bit it again, and walked step by step towards Doflamingo, who was twitching like a bloody man. When he reached Doflamingo, the latter was struggling to open his swollen eyelids. Darren stretched out his big hand, grabbed Doflamingo's head, and lifted the latter into the air. Let his eyes be level with yours. The setting sun pierced the clouds after the rain, casting a thin layer of blood on the world. Among the mottled ruins surrounded by thick smoke, a 3-meter-tall naval captain was carrying a blonde kid covered in blood and only as tall as his waist. Drops of blood flowed from the latter's body and dripped to the ground. Darren quietly stared at Doflamingo, who was in a coma, and suddenly grinned. So, can we talk now? He paused, as if remembering something, and added. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. How rude. The naval captain blew out a stream of smoke. My name is Rogers Darren, the highest officer of the North Sea Navy. Everyone calls me King of the North Sea, but I like my other nickname even more. The scum of the Navy. Ask for everything. Thank you very much. If you like this book, please give it a 5-star review. Thank you. Chapter 56 Dabi Douer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Burning makes everything in the world smell different. Times degree times. A piece of white paper is completely different from a damp tree. The smell of expensive wild boar meat and burning human flesh are similar, but 10-year-old Doflamingo has not tasted the taste of meat for a long time. Flames rose before his eyes, and the dark night sky was reflected red by the blazing flames. Screams, curses, clamoring, resentment, scolding. The explosion sound of the wall being burned and cracked woke him up from the pain, and the noisy sounds whizzed past him. His eyes were covered and his body was tied to the city wall, like a sinner undergoing execution. It's the Tianlong family. Don't kill them, let them suffer alive. Countless people stood under the city tower, shouting angrily at the Don Quixote family hanging on the city wall. They rained stones, rotten vegetable leaves, rotten eggs and garbage on several people on the city wall. Doflamingo felt the sticky substance splash on his face and then flow down. He heard his father's mournful cries. How ironic. Father, You gave up your noble identity as a celestial dragon, thinking that this was compassion and kindness, so you could get close to the common people and live a peaceful and friendly life with them, but have you seen it? Oh no, your eyes are also covered and you cannot see, but can you hear it? Their greedy breathing, their ferocious laughter, their almost boiling desire, Father. This is the civilian you keep saying you want to get close to. Did they thank you? No. What they saw was God stepping down from the altar. This is human stupidity, this is human weakness. Who can resist the temptation to trample on the great God? They just want to step on the God who has fallen into the ditch and spit on him. Are you crying? Such thing, what's the use of crying now? Doflamingo suddenly wanted to laugh, the flames gradually spread up, and the rolling heat waves licked the walls, he smelled barbecue, his feet were almost cooked, the abuse still continues, countless pieces of corrupt garbage are thrown from all directions, 2 lines of blood and tears oozed from Doflamingo's eyes. Listening to the overwhelming curses, he finally couldn't help but laugh ferociously. He clenched his fists tightly. Remember it, you guys. I won't die. He grinned, showing his beaten and bloody teeth, that was his remaining pride. When the crowd saw this scene, their expressions changed, although the torture of the Tianlong people allowed them to vent their inner resentment and anger, the fear in their hearts still existed. No matter how you torture me, I will survive, Doflamingo raised his head and looked down at the motionless crowd below with a contemptuous expression. They may keep watching him burn to death on this city wall, but they don't want to see me begging for mercy. I am a celestial dragon. The greatest being in the world. Doflamingo roared furiously in his heart, and gradually opened his split lips, revealing an unruly smile. Then I'll kill you all. Not a single one left. The scene suddenly changed. The dilapidated rooms, filled with dirt and worry, are filled with garbage and scraps in the corners, flies were flying around, and the warm sunlight outside the window could not shine into this damp and cold room. The hand that was holding her tightly fell slowly and feebly. Doflamingo stared blankly at his mother who was motionless on the hospital bed, his pupils seeming to have lost focus. Rosinandi's sobs could be heard nearby. I'm sorry, Douer. The father who was sitting in front of the hospital bed whispered, his eyes red and his face looking haggard. I'm sorry, is it helpful? Doflamingo suddenly smiled. Laughing like crazy, laughing till tears flowed. It's all your fault, blah blah blah, it's all your fault. He smiled maniacally and pulled out his pistol. The muzzle of the gun was pointed directly at his father. If it weren't for you, Mother wouldn't have died of illness. If it weren't for you, our family would still be living happily in this world. If it weren't for you, I would still be a high-ranking celestial dragon. The ancient sage Don Quixote Ming looked at his own son who raised the gun, with a look of horror on his face, but he quickly smiled with relief, smiled gently, boom. Gunshots fired, the celestial dragon slowly fell to the ground, a pool of blood gushing out. I'm sorry, Douer. He murmured, in his vision that was gradually stained red with blood and became blurry, his biological son, cry and laugh. The screen kept flashing again, under the pressure of silence. A blonde child carried a bloody head and climbed the snow-white and sacred staircase to the sky step by step. His head was still bleeding, his expression was frozen there, with wisps of gentle smile. Soon he saw the 5 old figures. They stood above the clouds, overlooking the world like gods. This was supposed to be my life. Doflamingo murmured in his mind, so he raised his biological father's head and coldly said to the 5 highest powers of the world government. I want to become a celestial dragon again. But what greeted him were 5 pairs of contemptuous, mocking, sarcastic and indifferent eyes. Don Quixote's family are traitors. You have no right to continue living in the Holy Land. Get back. You are no longer a celestial dragon. Also, wipe the stairs to the sky clean. Doflamingo finally wiped the stairway to the sky clean, then he boarded a merchant ship and came to the North Sea like a lost dog. A few gangsters approached him, they bowed before him. Listen up, Douer, you are the king. No one will be allowed to disobey you. You will one day become the king of this sea. Yes, I am the king, one day, I will become the king of this sea. I am Doflamingo. I want to be the king of this sea. The world government, the 5 old stars, the celestial dragons. I will destroy this world and everything you rule. I want, snapped. A big punch made Doflamingo suddenly open his eyes and wake up from his sleep. My face was burning with pain, no, not just on my face, but on my whole body, there was no place that didn't hurt. He looked confused. I'm sorry, I don't want to disturb your dreams, but you are too noisy. A deep voice sounded. Doflamingo saw a black-haired marine with his legs crossed, a lit cigar in his mouth, and he shrugged helplessly towards him. More updates, please support me, thank you. Chapter 57 Ming GE's Training Plan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Doflamingo's pupils shrank and his heart beat rapidly. This is, that Navy. That Beihai Admiral. Rogers Darren. The image of this guy not long ago reappearing in his mind was as brutal as a ferocious beast, completely crushing and defeating everyone in the Don Quixote pirates, and a biting chill ran down his spine. Don't be nervous, I mean no harm. Darren sat comfortably on the sofa, crossed his legs, and puffed away. He saw a hint of deeply hidden fear in Doflamingo's eyes, and he couldn't help but smile. Sure enough, the disobedient kid still needs to be beaten before he becomes sensible. Hell, there was no harm in it. Doflamingo felt as if his heart had been stabbed by a sharp sword when he heard these words. He stared at Darren with his bloodshot eyes and gritted his teeth and said, "What on earth do you want to do?" He glanced at his surroundings. This is a dark hall, with oil lamps hanging on the grey walls, casting dim light and shadows in the room, making it look extremely gloomy. The door to the hall was not closed, and outside was a dilapidated courtyard. On the arches of the gallery leading to the courtyard, large pieces of rotten plaster wall peeled off, exposing damp masonry. There are dark doors on both sides of the hall, and there is darkness inside that cannot be illuminated by light, for cadres, Torpole, Diamanti, Virgo and Pica, were lying in the corner of the hall. Their wounds had been simply bandaged, their eyes were closed, and they were still in a coma. Seeing that his cadre's life was not in danger, Doflamingo secretly breathed a sigh of relief, raised his stubborn face, and said coldly, "Why don't you just kill me? I'm a pirate, you're a navy, don't you, the navy, who claim to be, just, take the fight against pirates as your highest honor. Kill you? No, 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 I said, I want to talk to you, there is no malice." Darren pretended to be helpless and said, "It's just that you attacked me directly when you disagreed with me. I had to just doing self-defense." Doflamingo was so angry that he almost spit out a mouthful of blood. "Are you kidding me?" Veins bulged on his forehead, and he roared ferociously. If it weren't for the pain all over his body that made him almost faint and covered in cold sweat, even if he couldn't beat him, he would have to fight again with this bastard navy. Believe it or not. Darren shrugged. As for what you said about the navy is justice and pirates are evil, that concept is outdated. He looked at the old-fashioned, pale kid in front of him with a half-smile. I am a navy scum. Justice, sin, neutrality, these concepts are all worthless to me. From ancient times to the present, this world has obeyed the most basic law. Justice will prevail. That's of course. Darren leaned forward, approaching Doflamingo with a smile on his unruly and cold face. Because the winner is the just one. Inspiring and enlightening. Doflamingo's face turned pale, and when he saw the crazy and ambitious eyes of the navy in front of him, he couldn't help but shrink back, but soon he realized what he was doing, gritted his teeth, puffed out his chest, and met Darren's eyes fiercely. So, even if you are the scum of the navy, so what? You're still a marine, that doesn't change anything. If you want to kill, just kill. Do it. Weak people don't even have the right to choose to die. He stared at Darren without giving in, and even a cruel smile emerged from the corner of his mouth. Darren smiled with satisfaction. It is indeed a workable material. He stared at the blonde kid in front of him with admiration. He was only 12 or 13 years old, but there was a desire and ambition to destroy everything in his eyes. I couldn't help but compare Doflamingo with the protagonist of this world, Straw Hat, 12-year-old Doflamingo. At this age, what is our destiny's son, Straw Hat Luffy, doing? It must be that he and his two good brothers are playing house, right? And what about Doflamingo? He has gathered a group of capable, loyal and reliable subordinates to carve out his own territory in the chaotic waters of the North Sea, the otherworldly talent, the power of the thread fruit, the natural aura of a king, and the identity of a celestial dragon. If he can control it properly and add fuel to the fire, Doflamingo should become an extremely useful card in his hand. At this moment, Doflamingo was like a rising meteor, bright and eye-catching. As long as he pushes back a little, he will definitely set the world on fire. Darren has a very clear plan for his future development. The identity of the Navy must not be abandoned easily. A powerful North Sea fleet that only listens to his orders is being established, not to mention the huge training resources that will be obtained after joining the officer training camp. Power, status, strength, subordinates, these are things that being a pirate cannot give him. Although the case of Sild Saint, a celestial dragon, was finally successfully resolved with his slick political skills, it also gave Darren a warning. This time I was lucky enough to pass, but what about next time? What about next time? Darren didn't believe that he would never have any interactions with the celestial dragons from now on. The break with the world government is a matter of time, and he must not put all his investments in the Navy. Zifa in the original plot is the best negative teaching material. For the sake of justice, he devoted his whole life to fighting for justice and gave everything he had, but in the end, it was his three proudest and most outstanding students who personally ordered, carried out, and buried him. Therefore, Darren must develop a trump card outside of the Navy that can make the world government and even the Navy headquarters fearful. And now, the answer is right in front of us, and the most important thing is that Doflamingo at this moment is only 12 years old. His body is not yet mature, and his concepts and understanding of the world are even more unformed. If it were the king of Dressrosa and the Shichibukai in the future, Darren would definitely kill him directly without even thinking about it, but Doflamingo is different now. He is still young. This means, as long as you apply a certain amount of stimulation, whipping, and training, he will obey you obediently. Thinking like this, a smile gradually appeared on Darren's face that made Doflamingo suddenly feel creepy, an intriguing smile. Doflamingo was familiar with that smile. It was as if the little boy had found an interesting toy. He couldn't help but shudder. Ask for everything. Thank you very much. Chapter 58. The Strong Never Complain. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The wall lamps in the dilapidated hall flickered and cast firelight. In the eyes of young Doflamingo, the marine sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed was half illuminated by the light and half hidden in the shadows, with a strange smile. I have good news for you. Darren smiled and said. You won't die today, and neither will your men. You can even live better than anyone else. I just need us to have a quick chat. Doflamingo was stunned. Is this guy serious? What do you want to talk about? His eyes flashed under his sunglasses, and he said hoarsely, life is better than death. Darren smiled with satisfaction when he saw Doflamingo's cooperation. Please tell me, what is your ambition? You have the aura of a king, and you are a noble Tianlong, but you have come to a barren sea like the North Sea. What is your plot? Tell me. What I want to hear is the truth. The Navy captain stared intensely at the blonde kid with bandages all over his body. If you want to raise a ferocious wolf, you must stimulate his desire for flesh and blood. Come on, Doflamingo. Doflamingo fell silent upon hearing Darren's question. A picture flashed rapidly in his mind. Flames, shouts, curses, hospital beds, corpses, gunshots, heads, stairs to the sky. Listen, Douer, you are the king. Countless memories flickered like a revolving lantern, finally converging into a sentence full of resentment and anger. He suddenly raised his head and met Darren's eyes, gritting his teeth. His eyes were stubborn and fierce. I want to destroy this world. Snapped. Darren slapped him and sent him flying several meters away. Doflamingo's body hit the mottled wall hard, creating a large crater, and large pieces of old lime peeled off. His face was visibly swollen, and he stared at the Navy, who suddenly took action with a look of disbelief on his face. What are you doing? Doflamingo asked angrily. Darren looked down at him with a look of disdain and sarcasm, and said lightly. I am disappointed. I thought you could talk about some earth-shattering ambition, but I didn't expect it to be such a boring thing. Destroy this world? This world didn't mess with you. What do you know? Doflamingo interrupted the marine captain with red eyes. He struggled to get up from the ground, and the wounds on his body opened again with his movements, and blood continued to ooze. When I was 10 years old, I had already seen the heaven and hell of this world. He stood on shaky legs, panting. The flames spreading to the city wall reappeared in his mind. Distorted faces were looming in the flames. They were cursing, hot, too hot. I should have been living in heaven, standing on the clouds, overlooking the world from above. But because of my stupid father's decision, my life fell from heaven to hell in an instant. As if the pain brought back the nightmare hidden in the deepest part of his memory, Doflamingo roared uncontrollably. A mere commoner, a mere untouchable, how dare to treat the great Tianlong people like pigs and dogs and drop them on the city wall? They burned them with fire. They shot them with arrows. They stoned them. They tried every means to torture us. Bah, 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 they wanted me to die, but I survived. He suddenly laughed maniacally. I survived. He raised his head, trying to detect any strange emotion of shock or surprise on the marine's face, but he was stunned. He failed, he couldn't tell. The Navy's face still maintained a contempt and disdain. That's it, he said. What does just this mean? Doflamingo stayed where he was. Such a tortuous, miserable, torturous life. Is it so unworthy of mention in the eyes of this Navy? No. A burst of unreasonable violent anger hit his throat, and Doflamingo trembled and roared. Isn't this enough? Because of my father's stupidity, our whole family is in poverty. I lost everything. I even rummaged through the trash for food because I was hungry. You don't know my past. No one can have a life as twists and turns as mine. Have you said enough? Darren interrupted coldly. He walked towards Doflamingo step by step. Gundam's body cast a huge black shadow, completely covering the latter, who was only about 1.5 meters tall. Do you think your life is miserable? Very tortuous? No one can compare with you, the Navy captain said with a sarcastic smile. Isn't it? Doflamingo retorted through gritted teeth. Forced by the pressure of the Navy in front of him, he subconsciously took a step back. I have seen a lot of miserable lives, and I have also seen a lot of tortuous lives. Believe me, Doflamingo. The sneer on the corner of the Marine Colonel's mouth widened even more. People who are more miserable and tortuous than you, there are too many. In this part of the North Sea, gunshots ring out every day, and rotting and smelly corpses are always floating in the harbor and coast. I've seen people who betray their blood brothers for money. I've seen people who sacrifice their wives for power. I've seen people who saw off their own legs for a living. I've seen many, many different stories. I'm tired of hearing it. But do you know? Even those poor people who are miserable and living a life worse than a pig or a dog, they don't cry and complain like you, like a bitch. How old are you? Are you 5? Or 3? Why don't you go home to your parents to nurse? Darren looked down at Doflamingo, whose face was gradually turning pale, with no concealment of disdain in his eyes. After the wolf inspires its bloody nature, the first person to bite back will be its owner. At this time, it must be trampled on, its self-esteem must be torn apart, and its wildness must be destroyed. Doflamingo clenched his fists, his eyes were red, and his teeth were clenching. My mother died of illness. Then she's so lucky. At least she doesn't have to listen to your damn complaints anymore. After all, you are just a spoiled young master and a brat. If I'm not wrong, when she was still alive, she probably couldn't hear it anymore. Your complaints are the most common, right? Darren scoffed. Or is your mother angry to death just because of your complaints? Doflamingo was dumbfounded. He felt his face burning, as if he had been slapped again. You wanna die? He roared like a beast and wanted to move his fingers. Boom. A fist had hit his abdomen. Doflamingo bent over and hit the wall with his back. His eyeballs were filled with bloodshot threads and he spit out a large mouthful of blood. Strong people never complain. Even civilians do this better than you. Darren grabbed Doflamingo's collar with one hand, raised him in front of him, and sneered. I have never seen a strong person who talks about the unfortunate life he leads all day long. With your caliber, you want to destroy this world. Doflamingo gritted his bloody teeth and struggled violently. Darren's eyes narrowed further. Soon, the heat is getting better and better. Ask for everything and be grateful. Chapter 59 The Devil's Rumblings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You complain about everything and blame your father. What have you done? Darren is relentlessly sarcastic and mocking, looking at the blonde kid in front of him with blood oozing from the corner of his mouth and becoming more and more ferocious. The invisible smile in the depths of his half-narrowed eyes grew stronger. Come on, say it, the greatest anger and hatred within you. Doflamingo clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. What did I do? What did I do? He suddenly gritted his teeth and roared with red eyes. I killed my stupid father. The moment he said the words, he seemed to have an outlet for his emotions, and a ferocious smile emerged on his face bit by bit. Beihai. He laughed maniacally. You can't imagine, right? That feeling is so wonderful. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have suffered so much suffering and misfortune. I'm not complaining, I'm taking action. I am a born king. Beihai. With a strong desire to win, his eyes stared at the navy in front of him. You should see how desperate his eyes are. You should see how wonderful his expression was when I took out the gun and pointed it at him. Bah, 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 bah. Doflamingo laughed crazily, but tears like blood oozed from his eyes, and he yelled crazily. I vow to take back everything I have. I've had enough of the days in hell. I am a god who was established in heaven when I was born, why should I live in this hell on earth? Before he died, he was still saying he was sorry. But what's the use of apologizing? Apologizing can't change everything. But if he's dead, yes. So I shot. I cut off his head, and the bloody head. I carried it back to the holy land of Marijoa. I wanted him to see with his own eyes that I became a celestial dragon again and lived the life that should belong to me. Bang bang bang, a burst of applause suddenly sounded, which was extremely harsh in the dark hall. Doflamingo looked at the black-haired marine clapping in front of him in astonishment. So it turns out that it is indeed a touching story with ups and downs. Darren clapped with a mocking arc on his face. This really makes me sympathize from the bottom of my heart. A stupid father, a gentle mother, a rebellious and paranoid son. Well, let me guess, the happy ending of the story should be that the son kills his own father, which proves himself, finally regained the life he wanted. Doflamingo felt like he was struck by lightning. Darren smiled. Right now you're going to collapse. Feel the despair. He squatted down, reached out and rubbed the blonde kid's hair, smiling teasingly. So, did you get everything you wanted, Doflamingo? You killed your beloved father and even cut off his head cruelly. The world government should be very satisfied with your actions, right? Doflamingo stood there blankly, his lips moved, but no words came out. Darren's smile was full of meaning, and he slowly approached the blonde boy. You were holding your father's head, as if you were returning from a great victory with trophies. You must have been very excited and surging at that time, right? Perhaps in your imagination, the world government will also pile up flowers along the way, play exciting music, and build a grand stage for you. Under the witness of the world, the unparalleled born King Don Quixote Doflamingo returns to the throne of the Draco. He made an exaggerated gesture, and his voice gradually became lower, revealing an unexplainable magnetism. You desire from the bottom of your heart that you will climb the ladder to heaven step by step under the eyes of thousands of people. You desire from the bottom of your heart that under the praise and adulation, the 5 old stars will personally put on your beautiful clothes. You desire from the bottom of your heart that you will become a celestial dragon again and live a good life again. The Navy captain's voice was like cold nails or sharp daggers, piercing deeply into the heart of the blonde boy. So you can prove your father wrong. so that you can find a suitable reason for killing your father. In this way, you can make the guilt and self-blame caused by patricide in your heart become a little easier. Every time he said a word, Doflamingo's face turned pale. But none of this happened. You risked everything, killed your father, endured self-blame and guilt, but in exchange you got cold looks, contempt, and ridicule. There is no glorious return ceremony, no applause and flowers, no life of superiority. You were so ambitious that you carried the prize of victory to the holy land of Mariajoya, but in the end you were driven out like a wild dog. I even heard that you knelt humbly on the stairway to heaven that day and wiped off the remaining blood on it. Enough. Doflamingo suddenly roared uncontrollably, his bloodshot eyeballs almost bulging out of their sockets. Say no more. Dense veins bulged on his forehead, his eyes were filled with unspeakable resentment and anger, like blazing flames, wanting to completely burn the entire world. That's why I want to destroy this world. Well, the heat is enough, it's easier than imagined, and it would break down. But that's right, he is only 12 years old, since the wild wolf is completely hungry, let's give it a hunting target. Darren's eyes turned dim and he smiled. No, you're going in the wrong direction. Think about it carefully, is it the world's fault that you have ended up in this situation? That he put his mouth to Doflamingo's ear and followed the instructions. You are a born king. Is the king's ability limited to venting his anger on humble civilians? There's no point in trampling on the weak. Doflamingo, think about it carefully, who is it that brought you to this situation? Is it your father? Maybe, but he's dead. Are they the civilians who tortured you? But they are also dead. Think about it carefully, who made you kneel on the ground and wipe the blood like a lost dog, and come to a place like Beihai where birds don't shit? Think about it carefully. If you can take revenge, who would be the most happy person to take revenge on? Think about it carefully. If you had the opportunity right now, imagine boldly, let some people kneel in front of you and beg for mercy. Who would you choose? That the Navy captain's magnetic voice was like the devil in hell murmuring, exuding a soul-stirring temptation. Doflamingo was stunned, his blood-red eyes trembled violently, and his expression kept changing. Darren gave him the finishing blow. Think about it, who do you most want to be? Doflamingo was shocked. 1 second, 0.2 seconds, 0.3 seconds, then, in Darren's satisfied eyes and smile, he was like a hungry wild wolf, his eyes were red, resentful, and crazy, and he roared out this sentence from between his teeth. World government, 5 old stars. Ask for everything and be grateful. Chapter 60 My Godson. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hatred is a very strange emotion, it is mixed with anger at unfair treatment and contains the urge to destroy the target. This emotion will not weaken or disappear with changes in time, place, and space. The scariest thing is that once the seeds of hatred are planted, no one can change them. This seed will continue to grow in a person's heart, take root and sprout, grow into a towering tree, and control a person's life from beginning to end. It will drive people to move forward crazily and do whatever it takes to achieve this goal. And now, the seeds have been planted. What kind of evil flower will it grow in the heart of the young celestial dragon in front of me? Darren is looking forward to it. Good, you finally see the truth of all this. Darren took a step back, staring intensely at Doflamingo in front of him, his tone full of appreciation. Now, let's talk about how to achieve this goal for you. Doflamingo was stunned when he heard this and quickly came to his senses. You want to help me? Of course, who in the whole North Sea doesn't know that I, Rogers Darren, am a helpful marine? Darren replied with a smile, taking out a cigar and lighting it. Doflamingo looked at the marine captain who was sitting on the sofa on the ground again, and suddenly said in a hoarse voice. Give me one. Darren looked at him in surprise, but did not refuse and threw a cigar over. Doflamingo took it and skillfully cut off the top with the thread fruit, then bit it in his mouth and lit it on fire, then took a sharp puff. That extremely skillful movement made the corners of Darren's mouth twitch slightly. This is an old smoker, however, no matter how you look at it. A 12 or 13-year-old kid smoking a cigar in an arrogant manner does seem a bit chaotic. Why are you helping me? After taking a few puffs of cigarette, Doflamingo gradually calmed down and looked at Darren coldly in his sunglasses and asked. You are a navy. The primary purpose of the navy is to maintain the rule of the world government. There is indeed great potential, and he has come out of the collapsed mood so quickly. Darren smiled and shrugged. As I said, I am not an ordinary marine. If I have to give you one reason, it's that I can't stand the behavior of the world government and the celestial dragons. The navy may be the face of the world government, or it may be the watchdog of the world government, but I don't want to be a dog. Those celestial dragons think they are gods and are born to be great people. It is a pity that I refuse to be the doll of a great person. Doflamingo stared at Darren with squinted eyes for a long time, then suddenly laughed sarcastically. I finally understand. You want to use me as a gunman to deal with the world government. Do you think I will believe you so easily? Darren grinned. Trust is not the basis for cooperation, interests are. We have a common enemy, don't we? Doflamingo suddenly laughed. But common enemy, Darren, your statement is really ridiculous. If the world government, no, the celestial dragons are your enemies, you should take action against the celestial dragons. But what I saw was a coward who only hides in the dark and incites hatred in others. You want me to cooperate with you, no, what you want more is to make me obey, but you can't come up with anything that is enough to convince me. Having said this, Doflamingo puffed out smoke arrogantly. My request is not too much. Even if you dare to kill a celestial dragon, it is not a deprived celestial dragon like me, but a real celestial dragon. He sneered confidently. I will recognize your ability, and even use your Beihai way to recognize you as my godfather. Oh. Darren raised his eyebrows with a strange expression. Are you sure you want to make this bet? Seeing the interested smile in Darren's eyes, Doflamingo suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart, but he still gritted his teeth and said cruelly. That's right, that he must not dare to take action against the Tianlong people. Doflamingo is not an idiot. He has collected information about the North Sea Admiral, greedy for money, lustful, bullying, flattery, longing for power. Such a person would not have the courage to take action against the world's noble celestial dragons. Thinking this, Doflamingo puffed up his chest with confidence and showed a sly smile, and the most important thing is that even if he really dares to take action against the Tianlong people, he will suffer crazy revenge from the world government. Naturally, this so-called agreement will no longer be in effect. This is what you said. Darren shook his head helplessly. To be honest, being your father is a very dangerous profession. But what a coincidence. He changed the topic and laughed playfully. I like danger. As he spoke, he took out an object the size of a fingernail from his arms and threw it in front of Doflamingo. The moment he saw the object, Doflamingo's pupils suddenly shrank into tiny needles, and the pores all over his body stood up at this moment. A heartbreaking chill surged from the soles of his feet and ran up his spine to his forehead, making his scalp tingle. That thing, that's a chip. The certification chip of the world's noble celestial dragon. Doflamingo swore he would never admit his mistake. Each Draco family holds a certification chip of the Draco. When the Draco decide to give up their power, they must hand back the certification chip. However, if the certification chip is surrendered, they will lose the protective power of the world government and navy. When his father decided to take his family to give up the rights of the Draco and leave the Holy Land Marie Joa, the Holy Land asked them to hand back their Draco certification chip. And he carried his father's head back to the Holy Land, just to get back his own chip. The chip cannot be forged or copied. Only the existence of the chip can prove the noble identity of the Tianlong people. It is the most important item that every Tianlong person will keep close to his or her body, but now in Darren's hand, he actually has a Draco identity chip. How can this be? Could it be? Just as Doflamingo was feeling turbulent in his heart, the deep voice of the Marine Colonel floated slowly in the dark hall. A few days ago, Hilda Saint, a celestial dragon, was unfortunately killed in the North Sea. According to the tracking investigation by members of the investigation team, Hilda Saint's official ship was defeated in an instant, without leaving any effective clues. Even the ship's surveillance camera didn't capture the slightest trace of the bug. Members of the investigation team came to the conclusion based on this, that Lord Sild Saint, the celestial dragon, died of an attack by a Neptune-like creature. It was an unfortunate accident. Darren blinked and smiled. Well, at least that's what the investigation report submitted to the government said. This identification chip was naturally touched out by him from the body of Hilda Saint. Doflamingo was stunned when he heard this, and a large amount of information poured into his brain. There were waves of chill on his forehead, and a look of fear gradually filled his pupils. This madman, actually dares to attack the Tianlong people. Moreover, he escaped unscathed. So, he did dare to kill himself. Doflamingo's mind went blank and was buzzing. Darren sat up with a smile, leaning his upper body forward slightly aggressively. As the face with the unruly smile kept coming closer, Doflamingo couldn't help but retreat, and his throat rolled unconsciously. Do you understand now, Doflamingo? I can give you everything you want. Power, status, territory, military protection, industry, influence. But you have to understand one fact. Beihai is my territory, and the rules here are the rules I set. As long as I don't allow it, no one can run wild in this place, not even the Tianlong people. Darren spat out a dragon-like smoke at Doflamingo's face unscrupulously. Follow me, the military in Beihai will belong to me, and the underworld in Beihai. He pointed at the forehead of the blonde kid. It's yours. Then, in the stunned eyes of the Tianlong boy, the dark-haired Navy reached out and rubbed the latter's short blonde hair. The flickering flame of the wall lamp cast a dancing, eerie light and shadow on his face. Darren smiled and said, Welcome to the North Sea, my godson. Welcome to the North Sea, my godson. Note, the original plot of the Draco-proof chip exists, but it's just not mentioned much.